The force accepted they made numerous mistakes, failing to preserve evidence. Poppi's last nappy, clothing and bedding was lost. Her father's laptop was also misplaced. And no real investigation into the toddler's death was carried out by police until 9 months later.
Welcome back, and thanks for being here. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. The story I have for you today is an incredibly sad one that's made even sadder by the fact that this little girl will likely never see any justice for her murder. This is the story of Poppi Worthington. Poppi Iris Worthington was born on October 20th, 2011 in Barrow-in-Furness, England. Her mother has never been publicly named for legal reasons, and her father's name is Paul Worthington. Poppi also had 5 siblings, including a twin brother. She was described as being very animated, bubbly, and funny. Poppi liked being in charge and would always get up extra early, waking up her family, excited to see them each morning. Poppi's mother was only 16 years old when she gave birth to her first child, and she was said to have come from a difficult upbringing herself. In 2009, Poppi's mother, who already had 3 daughters at that point and was now in her mid-20s, met Paul Worthington, who was much older than she. They had 1 son together before Poppi's mother then became pregnant with Poppi and her twin brother. Now, Paul's relationship with Poppi's mother had its ups and downs, and sometimes he would live in the house with her and the children, other times he would live elsewhere. But Poppi's mother would still say that Paul was her best friend and was a great father to the children. Paul, Poppi's mother, and the 6 children lived together in a 3-bedroom home in Barrow that they had been renting from Paul's sister, Tracy Worthington. At the beginning of December 2012, Poppi had been suffering with some cold-like symptoms, and she had some sort of viral bug. Her nose was runny, she had been sleeping longer during her naps, and was going back and forth between having constipation and diarrhea. On the afternoon of December 11th, 2012, she was still not feeling well, and during her lunch, she would suddenly start screaming in her high chair and throw herself back. Her mother had picked her up and began rubbing her belly because it looked like Poppi had a stomachache. Just minutes later, Poppi had terrible diarrhea that her mother would say was brick red in color. Later on, Poppi's mother would put the little girl to bed around 7:30 p.m. Poppi slept in her crib upstairs in one of the rooms that she shared with her sister. After putting the little girl to bed, Poppi's mother had then headed downstairs to spend the night on the couch, while Paul slept upstairs in their bedroom. At some point during the night, sometime after 2 a.m., though Poppi's mother can't exactly remember what time, she heard her daughter scream loudly. She described it as a scream similar to the one that the 13-month-old had made earlier that day when she had stomach pains. Shortly after, Poppi's mom heard the floorboards upstairs creaking, and then Paul came downstairs and told her that Poppi needed a new diaper and she was feeling unwell. But Poppi's mother would be awoken yet again, not long after, to Paul coming downstairs holding Poppi in his arms. The little girl was limp and not breathing. She also did not have her pajama bottoms on any longer. Emergency services were immediately called, and Paul began to perform CPR on her. While they were waiting for the paramedics to arrive, Paul would also change Poppi's diaper that had since been filled with diarrhea. Poppi would be rushed to Furness General Hospital, but at 7:07 a.m., she was declared dead, her heart having never resumed beating. A doctor who had fought to save the girl's life said that her injuries were like nothing he had ever seen. When police spoke with Poppi's father, he informed them that he had gone upstairs around 9:30 p.m., bringing his laptop with him. He'd then been looking at football scores, scrolling Facebook, and shortly before he went to bed, he had looked at X-rated adult stuff. The father claimed that shortly after falling asleep, he had been awoken to Poppi screaming. He'd then gotten out of bed and gone into Poppi's room, where he found her in her crib, rigid and crying like she'd just had a bad dream. So he'd picked her up, cuddled her, then brought her into his room, where he tried to calm her down further. Paul stated at this point he had undone some of the snaps on Poppi's onesie to see if she had pooped, as she had been arching her back like she needed to. The father had then discovered that she did indeed soil her diaper, so he left her on the bed and went downstairs to grab a new one. But by the time he went back upstairs again, he said it was no more than 90 seconds. Poppi was already asleep. Since it was close to the time that she would normally wake up in the morning anyways, he decided to not disturb her and he would change her diaper later. But it was only a few minutes later that Paul reached over to Poppi, touched her arm, and realized that she was limp. That's when he had run downstairs to alert Poppi's mother and call 999. When an autopsy was performed on the toddler's body, it was found that she had hemorrhages in her chest and her throat. She also had 2 fractures to her leg that had never been previously reported. And she had blood coming from her bottom that was also dilated. Though her cause of death could not be determined, it was ruled as unnatural, and the coroner believed that she had been SA'd. Even though police had almost immediately been alerted of this, no one would be formally interrogated in Poppi's death until August of 2013. Prior to then, however, investigators had obtained DNA swabs from both of her parents. A swab had been taken from Paul's penis that would test positive for Poppi's DNA. Though the father would explain that this was because he had put his fingers into Poppi's mouth, trying to make sure her airway was clear while they waited for emergency responders. He had then gone to the bathroom later before washing his hands. Paul Worthington would not end up being arrested until August of 2013 on suspicion of SAing his daughter Poppi. But even though he was arrested, he was never charged. This was because the case against him had started falling apart from the very beginning of the investigation. Police should have immediately closed off the entire house to preserve any evidence. But instead, they had only sealed off the one bedroom where Poppi had been sleeping with her father. And they allowed the couple's remaining children and other family members to go freely in and out of the house. The laptop that Paul had told police he'd been using to watch adult stuff that night had also never been seized, and he claimed later on that he had sold it to a friend. Officers who were supposedly guarding the property would additionally let Poppi's aunt, Tracy Worthington, who had gone to the home after Poppi's mom frantically called her, throw away the last diaper that the 13-month-old had been wearing. Tracy had found the diaper just sitting near the fireplace, and according to her, it had smelled so rancid that she did not really look in it to see if there was any blood. She just wanted to dispose of it. When Tracy arrived at the home, Poppi and her father, Paul, had already been taken in an ambulance, and she was told by Poppi's mother that Poppi had been kneeling up in her crib, crying, but not screaming, as earlier claimed. So Paul had come downstairs to get her a bottle, then gone back upstairs, laid Poppi down, and began rubbing her back. According to Tracy, something later made Paul go back and check on Poppi, though she didn't say what. And it was at that time that he discovered she wasn't breathing. Tracy would say of her brother, "I know he's innocent. I love him. We are standing behind him, and there is a lot more involved than what's being reported. The police have lost evidence. What is he supposed to do?"
Paul Worthington's sister today insisted he was wholly innocent, but because the police lost vital evidence, he can no longer prove it.
He wants to know what happened to her. But like I say, because of all this, he might not never know.
And he'll always be labelled an abuser.
Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, people who know him know he's not. But that doesn't help him. He's still got that tag attached to him now because of all this cock-ups by the police, basically. You know, they've ruined his life.
When officers had taken Paul's initial statement in regards to Poppi's death, they weren't suspicious of him despite the fact that the father seemed to be getting things wrong, and even changed his story slightly. There were additionally inconsistencies between what Paul had said and what Poppi's mother had said happened. But instead of seeking to investigate Poppi's death as a potential homicide, an officer just called it a traumatic situation and failed to raise an alarm. Police were also said to have been hampered by opposing findings by two pathologists who had completed a post-mortem on Poppi. One coroner was concerned that she had sustained injuries from a serious SA, even repeating these findings to police over the phone. But the other pathologist claimed that her injuries could have been caused by another condition, such as hemorrhoids due to her constipation. According to this second pathologist, if the little girl had been abused in that manner, he would have expected to see much more evidence, saying that her injuries were much too subtle for that kind of attack. This pathologist also believed that some of the marks found on Poppi could have been caused by post-mortem phenomenon that had occurred in the 5 days between her death and the post-mortem examination. Two of the officers on the case would also be found to have open cases of gross misconduct on their part. One would end up retiring before it was further investigated, and the other left Cumbria Police after being demoted for incompetence. By the time Poppi's father, Paul, had been arrested, vital evidence had been lost, and therefore police did not have enough to charge him.
The former policeman who led the investigation admits there were faults, but says they were doing their best amid contradictory medical evidence.
We don't live in an ideal world. I've thought about this long and hard, and I'm confident that I could have given an explanation that would have satisfied any performance panel that what we did, even though we've made mistakes, would have been acceptable.
But today, the Chief Constable of Cumbria admitted they'd failed Poppi.
The most basic thing that police officers should do is secure and preserve evidence, and there was a failure to do that. There was a lack of supervision at the scene, and as a result of that, some items weren't collected, which meant that the investigative rot set in.
So in December of 2014, it was ordered that an inquest into Poppi's death take place. But it only took 7 minutes to declare that her death was unexplained, after the judge stated that he was satisfied to rely on only the findings from a private fact-finding that had happened months earlier. Then, in July of 2015, a high court ordered that a fresh inquest take place, after the first hearing was deemed irregular. Upon hearing all the evidence this time around, including contradictory evidence from expert medical witnesses, the judge stated that he believed Paul Worthington had penetrated his daughter Poppi, and the assault stopped when the youngster cried out in pain. But he also said that she did not die during the course of or immediately following this atrocious act. Therefore, the assault did not cause her death. But it was believed that Paul Worthington had assaulted his daughter on his bed. Then following the assault, he laid a cover over her and went to sleep. Poppi was believed to have died because her ability to breathe was compromised as a result of an unsafe sleeping environment, which had been made even worse by the fact that Poppi was stuffy and sick. But still, there was not enough evidence to press charges against Paul, or anyone else for that matter. Then, in June of 2016, a serious case review was held, and it found that Poppi's mother had had a difficult and traumatic childhood, in a family with intergenerational experiences of neglect and abuse. It was also revealed that Paul Worthington was an ex-partner of a woman who was feared to have sexually exploited Poppi's mother. Apparently, Child Services had previously been involved with Poppi's family members, but they had closed out everything with them in 2007. Paul Worthington also previously had involvement with Child Services, though it's not said what for, and his case was closed out in 2003. But despite a pathologist suspecting that Poppi had been sexually assaulted, in January of 2013, Social Services had decided that the case needed no further action. And it was not until the following October that the remaining 5 children in the household were removed. Desperate to avoid a scandal, the council attempted to have all mention of Poppi's death gagged by a court order for the next 15 years. But this had been denied. After Poppi's mother pushed for her daughter's death to be further looked into yet again, in November of 2017, another inquest into the little girl's death began. During this, the court would end up hearing from 39 different witnesses, including Poppi's father, Paul Worthington, who had since gone into witness protection after receiving numerous death threats. The inquest also heard that Cumbria police had finally located the laptop that Paul had been using the night that Poppi died. But upon meticulous forensic physical and digital examination, they were unable to find any evidence of criminal activity on the laptop. A detective who had been on the scene the night of Poppi's death would speak during the inquest, and he would say that while there had been no visible bruising on the toddler, there had been blood around her backside. He additionally said that there had been no effort to remove the sheet that she had been lying on or Paul's laptop that night, because it was not considered a criminal investigation at the time. Now, Poppi's father, Paul, who had been whisked into the hearing by police guards, refused to answer 252 different questions, stating that he was exercising his legal right to not say anything which may incriminate himself. His sister, Tracy Worthington, would later say that she did not blame him for not answering these questions, as he had been informed to do exactly that by his lawyer. She said he's gone through all this process over the last 4 years, and everything that's been dumped on him, I don't have to be convinced he's done nothing. I know. The inquest would again conclude with the ruling that while Poppi had been essayed by her father Paul prior to her death, there was not enough evidence to go forward with charging him, due to the sloppy investigation that had happened years prior.
The response from Cumbria Police, whose investigation was fraught with failings, nothing short of humiliating.
The primary responsibility of the police when investigating infant and child deaths is to shed light on the circumstances surrounding the death, and in so doing provide a voice for the child. In our failure to undertake an effective investigation after her death, Cumbria Constabulary has let down Poppi Worthington and her family, and I deeply regret this.
And in March of 2018, the Crown announced that they would not be charging Paul at all unless any new evidence came to light. Sweet little Poppi Worthington was buried not long after her death in an unmarked grave near her home in Barrow-in-Furness. In 2018, her father Paul would leave her a birthday card on her grave saying, "You are always in my thoughts. Have a beautiful birthday playing with all the other special boys and girls up there. Daddy." Well, thank you for listening to Poppi's story today. It is very saddening and frustrating knowing that this little girl will more than likely never have any justice for what happened to her on that night in December of 2012. I think that it's highly likely that her father assaulted her, but whether or not he intended to suffocate her after she screamed out, it's very hard to say since police so badly handled the investigation. What do you think? So if you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and turn on your notifications too so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least 3 times every single week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.